have every intention of uh putting on makeup tonight and dialing myself up a dress, maybe even put, I don't know, a brush through my hair, at least my bangs, but I well, like with the makeup, right? You do that first because you have to put the hair back, so it doesn't like get. Although sometimes you see that the powder, and you see my hair and the the white um tones or pigments in the makeup around. So you try to put there. It didn't get that far. And then a bow I'll put in. It's gonna match this pajamas. Um, I didn't do that because I was crying a lot. Um, I didn't get to bed till late, which was fine because I wanted to sleep late to get through the day. Um, but she didn't let me, so it was still AM. I thought I could have had a few hours more there where I was sleeping, but she just wouldn't, just like aggressively barking. And at first, I was just like, okay, stop, like blanking her, like okay. And that was so long. She just wouldn't, just it was at me and at me. So I had to get up and I had to let her out. But the thing is, I gotta watch. I gotta make sure, and because when even though it's Christmas Eve, um, oh God, that hurts. You still get deliveries. You don't want anyone to open that gate and meet her. So, um, which didn't happen. I did get a delivery. Thank you, John. But that was later, and it was inside the gate. So I know. I I would have seen that. So either way, it's okay. Um, so I'm forced to get up, and it hits me real quick. Um, just the pain that I really wanted to uh, avoid. Tell myself that I could get through. That I knew it would be hard, but I thought it would be hard only if I was awake. And I didn't want to be awake, but uh, but I try to put my computer on. It takes it takes a while. Some days it doesn't even go on anymore, but after about an hour I got it on. Um and there's this video. Sometimes I will put on videos, to keep me company, to hear voices when it's so quiet. Except for sometimes, her barking. But so because I don't s- when you're gonna speak and it's gonna hurt. God, that hurt. Oh jeez. I think can I get through a few words and no, it's gonna hurt. Okay. Mm, I think, how could this affect me? Oh God. Ah! I had taken to watching de-influencing videos. It's oh jeez. It's about um like spending money on things. And it's not because I can be de-influenced. It's because I can't spend money on anything. So it's to make me feel better about that because it used to be, in my depression, my anxiety, like something that helped me cope was sort of I used to be able to go to a thrift, and that could help. I can't do that any longer. Um, buy maybe a pair of pantyhose. Um, oh my God, that is so dark. That is so dark. How could you write me that? That is so oh my God. I've lost nearly all of my family. Mary, go fuck yourself. W- I'm just Jesus fuck. The title of this video, which often is the only thing people read, and I know that, or respond to, like they won't watch what I say because they have no context and write just completely the opposite of what I'm saying. But anyway, I had the title Still Weak, right? From beginning of where I was in the book. And then people kept saying of something of being better, and it was just, what do they respond? They only read the title. This is because I'm it's a Christmas song, but Jesus, where was I? Jesus fuck. Don't say marry anything. Joy, 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 joy to the fucking world. Are you kidding me? I'm trying to be honest. I'm trying to be real with you. God, where was that? Okay. I I didn't think it would hurt me to see it's to because I can't even do that anymore. I can't do that. I didn't have anything else. So to tell me that this is good actually, that you can't have or do or anything at all, okay, that's fine. But in this video, she's like, this is a feel good, she said. It's a little bit different for de-influencing. And it's be this year, what? It was these women, and it's nothing against them. It actually was very, very nice that they were saying about the year. It was like some holiday party at their house of just women. And it was like, this year well, it was their names. I was say, oh, my name is a Karen, and this year I like graduated this, and or this year I got a raise and a promotion. Oh, this year I had a baby. This and all of the good thing. And I thought that's what really like did me in for the rest of the day was like, oh, I want to play along because that's what she said in the video. She said, so I want all of you to play along and say this year what accomplishment and you're most proud of that you did that improved your life from last year. And it was all about how she said, I bet you. And she even said at the end, a different one was, I'm not going to tell you to do a no buy. which is like, well, I have to anyway. I have a negative every month. Okay. I'm not gonna tell you to no buy because you don't know your circumstance of next year and the she said, I bet you if you think back of last year, what you thought would be of this year, that it would surprise you. And I'm just like, holy shit. Holy sh okay. Last year, oh my God. I thought everything I was afraid of had happened, but there actually are sort of new things and along that line that are even worse, you know? So, like, at this point, a year ago, I had so much fear, you know? I had a very it's like a dark prophecy, like a ah, I told myself everyone tried to tell me, like, it's like dark stories that aren't true. Then they've came true. That was at this point last year. All of that was hope because they're asking you now to think of all the good things that happen, like, and so next year, and it made me think, you know, about the I'm really sad, you know? It's been rainy. I go into um, that bathroom there, not to go to the bathroom, but the door is open. And because I could see she had gone to the bathroom in that room, the like liquid, like something's wrong and it's blood in that. And I think, oh my God, have I not been feeding her properly, feeding her enough? I had 6 pack of cans. I have one left. I don't think I have had enough food to be giving her because I can't go to the store. And I take things out. No bread. So I start thinking, and I know it's probably she's upset. She looks at me like, you know, she knows I'm crying, in a lot of pain. Sometimes I just start like screaming, not at her, but I'm like, I can't take this. I'm so sad, shrieking in pain. She and I'm like, just like, holy shit, I'm failing her more. And I thought, is she not? And then I thought, I had still steaks from that butcher box because I go to the grocery store, but you know they're in the freezer and they stay frozen. I thought maybe I should save them, but I thought no because it's like the death row. It could be her last meal. I should be cooking for her. Like it's her last because I don't know if it is. And I took all the steaks to put in the um fridge. Susan Frost, and I gave her some ice cream, and she didn't eat that. And I found some of the butcher box chicken nuggets, but she hasn't eaten them. And I don't know if it's bad that they get cold if I should eat them again, but I gave them here in case she gets hungry. And I remembered sitting out there with Rex, and I gave him chocolate because he was gonna die. And I thought, he can finally have some because he's gonna die anyway. And the chocolate ice cream, and he could lick it. He couldn't eat, the night before, and I tried to get him Del Tacos and McDonald's, and he always loved that, but he couldn't eat it. So I sat outside with him in May, and he laid there in pain, and he had that ice cream, and I thought about all the times I should have gave him more. I should have gone, like, every night and give him everything. But, you tell yourself, it's better for them to tell yourself to stop being scared and anxious because they'll see it. But then if you're not constantly thinking they could die, then you're not doing as much for them. And so I got everything, to give her. And I was like, I'm so sorry, feeling I tried to be happy looking. So she doesn't have to see that. But that's why I called it Baby, Please Come Home because I miss him so much. And it just, I feel like I'm not coping. Like I said, coping is what you can bear. But we put something heavy. You put something heavy on the table, right? Now, if you're strong and you grew up strong, you have family, you have support, you have what it takes to be able to cope with this weight. But I'm not. I'm the cracks, and at a distance, you can't see. They both look the same until one collapses. But only one is really coping with that weight, and the other one can't cope with it. It's gonna just fall. Then if you look close enough at me and not be Mary, 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 Stella, it's not coping. It's and all I want to say is to myself, find hope somewhere for next year. This is what you do. They're telling you. And after last year, I remember I lost so much. But I said, at least I have this. And then all of my hope last year was wrong, and it only hurt me. It only, ah, it only served to do me harm. And I was just so stupid. It wasn't just anxiety, it was just the I don't think I'm gonna get another Christmas. I don't think I'm gonna make it next year. That was the that was the fear that it hurts. The fear that this would happen, and I wouldn't cope. I couldn't cope ultimately, and it's all that happened. They tell you, go on, exercise and move your oh god. I actually thought, no, I didn't. I was gonna say, I actually thought I might make it through and not suffer so much for the holiday. No, I probably didn't really. That was just a fucking false hope again. Jesus. But it's so much harder than I realized that when you're told to look back a year, when you're told to try to find where it was, that I'm sorry, I think of it a year ago. It's like I want to say to my past self from a year ago, like, holy shit, girl, don't even do it. Don't even. Um, I'm weaker. I'm dying. I'm falling apart. My life is so unbearable. I'm not even gonna have health insurance. It's just the cracks become harder and harder to handle. And this is where I begin the year. I end the year. It's not hope. It's it's ultimately acceptance that I couldn't bear a year ago, but I have to now. And I don't think I see another Christmas. But I don't think I want to. This is not. I get an email. Was it today? Was it yesterday? Or did I see it just today? 50,000? 51 and some odd number theft. As I said, I can't even feed my dog and I've been robbed. 51, not even the 51 thousand times 51,000 new infringements sent. It's not even the amount of robberies, is it? Just new in the inbox. as everything dies and they'll pick and rob at you too. If that's not enough. Well, sorry, I'm trying to. If I had a comb in my hair, maybe a bit better. So, calms me a bit while I read. If you'll bear with me, my book, my dogs, my mm, self-pay medical. I can't speak. I tried to speak to them. I can't get the I can't advocate for myself. I've tried. Sorry. Sorry. Mm. What does that say? Lilac. Mm-mm. In trouble. Hi. Okay, let me ooh, okay, okay, ah. I'm trying to recall where we were last night in the book. It'll come to me. Okay, we're still on living in a suitcase. Pulling you pulling you up. Okay, so he had met a woman, Kathleen, and I remember I was going to see if I could pull her up on like Dynasty. I think he said she was on. Was it Dynasty or was it Dallas? Mm, and The Godfather Part Two, but yeah, Dynasty, and I haven't. So what I'm saying is, as I read this, I'm actually not familiar with her work as an actress. So if you are, you're ahead of me there. Um, anyways. Yeah, we were like peas in a pod when we announced our engagement at a party in late 1986. None of our friends were remotely surprised. So my year out in the USA became a permanent move. Kathleen split her time between her place in Laurel Canyon and my rental above Beechwood. I didn't think that he would. And I started to look for an LA-based band for my third album and national tour. I advertised for musicians in the recycler, narrowing the hundreds of replies down to a few dozen. The tryouts took place in a warehouse in Reseda. Most of the applicants had no track record to speak of, though I was very taken with an excellent drummer called Dave Owens, who had a day job at the Knott's Berry Farm amusement park, where he was sometimes required to perform in a chicken suit. I paired him with an amazing bassist, Terry Jackson, who had once played all day at Jerry Lewis fundraising telethon. Do they still do telethons for anything? I don't remember the last telethon, but I don't have cable either. Mm. I mean, I guess they could do it on YouTube, right? Okay. I think I used to watch this telethon when I was a child. I think I did. Okay. Larry Treadwell's claim to fame was that he'd been the guitarist at a Christian duo supporting Pope John Paul II during his famous Pope-mobile tour of American stadiums. The band was rounded out by curvaceous percussionist and backup singer Laura Creamer and a frenetic keyboard player named Mike Capitan. While driving down Beechwood Canyon one day on my way to rehearsals, I got a glimpse of a flyer pinned to a lamppost advertising a band called Lost Toy People. Kathleen's housemate and childhood friend was Mary Kohler. She was looking for a job, and her previous position, by complete coincidence, was a personal assistant to Michael Jackson. For 3 years, she went every day to his Havenhurst estate and organized life picking out birthday presents. For Elizabeth Taylor, inviting. Why is this going wrong? Inviting the Astairs over for dinner, or rounding up Bubbles the chimp when he escaped into the Encino undergrowth. Mary had a pager and was on call 24 hours a day. Michael would beep her at 2 a.m. just to ask where the popcorn was kept. She devoted her life to him. Then, suddenly, for no apparent reason, she was given a fortnight's wages and shown the door. She hadn't messed up or offended anyone, try as she might. She could not get Michael on the phone. By this stage of his career, he was insulated by layers of security staff, aides, and family retainers. Mary was devastated. Kathleen comforted her, but of course, there was nothing I could do to intervene. What I was able to do was offer her a job, and she started working for my management team under Andy Ferguson. Now that I was living full time in America, I no longer needed Leslie to be my UK-based personal assistant. I hoped we could stay in touch, but it was clearly the end of an era. She had been loyal and supportive for many years, and if things had worked out a little differently, we might have been a couple. I never thanked her enough at that time, but the fact was, towards the end, we bickered a lot. Why does not surprise me with this guy? Kathleen and I were married in July 1988 on a Thames sailing barge in my native Suffolk, England. We sold our respective properties, mine in Fulham, hers in Laurel Canyon, and bought a lovely 1923 Spanish-style mansion above Franklin Avenue. Our house had originally belonged to Wallace Beery, an Academy Award-winning actor who was once married to Gloria Swanson, and on whom John Goodman based his wrestler character in the Coen brothers' Barton Fink. Although huge, the house was affordably priced because of where it was situated. Whitley Heights was the first hilltop neighborhood in Hollywood. It was developed back in the 1920s and 30s, only to be sliced in two when the 101 freeway was put through the hills in the 1950s. The developer H.J. Whitley had modeled his enclave on hilltop villages in Sicily and Spain, but he failed to recognize that unlike those places, Los Angeles is subject to torrential downpours and the occasional 8.3 rated earthquake. The Whitley Heights hillside estate had never been provided with adequate drainage, and all day long and night the 18-wheeler trucks on the freeway rattled our foundations. Ours was therefore a true house of cards, but we loved it. It had a stately living room with cast iron gates, velvet curtains, and plaster reliefs. Next to that was a pub with high wicker stools and a full bar. We bought a splendid grand piano, and we used to arrange twisted cocktail evenings and invite over our Hollywood Hills neighbors, who included Julian Lennon, Gary Kemp, the as yet unknown George Clooney, and a very young J.J. Abrams. Across the street was a rambling house rented out to the Red Hot Chili Peppers, still relatively unheard of outside of LA. My new band was really starting to cook. We developed some of the grooves that had originated during the auditions. Some were very funky, while others were kind of high energy acid swing. I added chord sequences and melodies. Grant chimed in with some lyrics, and we took the songs into a small studio to lay some demos directly to half-inch analog tape. The album was shaping up to be a kind of crazy postcard from a British expat on a debauched visit to Hollywood. To ease the pressure of a first gig, I wanted it to be kept quiet so that the crowd would be minimal and reviewers would stay away. It was a condition of the booking that the club did not advertise my show. On the afternoon of the gig, someone leaked the news to local radio station K-Rock that a bespectacled Englishman was playing at a frilly club with a saucy name. That same evening, to my utter dismay, when I arrived at the club for sound check, there was already a line outside, stretching clear around the block. I felt the familiar pangs of a Radio City-style panic attack coming on. Was the band ready? How would the crowd react to my new style songs? Could I still cut it on stage after a 3-year hiatus? Stuck in a traffic jam on Sunset Boulevard, I started chewing my lip and my hands were shaking. Kathleen had never seen me like this, but she had a suggestion. Why not do the gig in drag? That's your suggestion. It was an insane idea, but it just might work. So, after sound check, she drove me over to the home of her friend Victoria. Proceeded to who was one of the backup artists on Dynasty. Victoria proceeded to invent a new persona for me, Erica Brady, a deranged Beverly Hills housewife. Erica had OD'd on diet pills and Quaaludes and was moonlighting in a punk band, resplendent in leather corset and stiletto heels, with backcombed blonde hair and an inflatable synthesizer. She chewed gum and swore like a sailor. Meanwhile, Kathleen went the other way and showed up as Erica's bearded boyfriend with her chest bound and a thick pair of socks stuffed down her Levi's. The crowd at Club Lingerie was not sure what to make of Erica and her diminutive toy boy. The band played each of the new songs twice, though, when someone blurted out, "Play Science." It was met with nothing but a stony stare. I certainly didn't make any new fans that day, but it did the trick as far as my stage nerves were concerned. The Lost Toy people officially popped their cherry. The rest of our West Coast gigs were a smash hit, and my agency began setting up a coast to coast North American tour covering over 30 cities. I was delighted with the way the band sounded. I had a special rapport with my bass player, Terry Jackson, no relation to the other Jacksons. He was a young black guy from St. Louis, Missouri, new to LA, and very green. He was a fabulous, flawless funk bass player, totally intuitive, who never played the same part twice. He had a huge teddy bear smile. We practiced acrobatics at the gym together, and at the climax of our set, he would cup his hands together and flip me into a back somersault. Kathleen and I offered him our spare room for a few months to get him settled, and he became like a kid brother. Most evenings, our house lit up with Terry's happy hour. This entailed improvised monologues at the piano by characters ranging from pimps and drug dealers to TV evangelists and Bible thumping politicians, keeping Kathleen, Mary, and my sister in law Jane in fits and giggles. Terry's finest recorded moments are on Aliens Ate My Buick. He had this ability to create solid, minimalist note patterns and space them out with outrageous melodic passing licks, never detracting too much from the main vocals or keyboard parts. His playing was the perfect complement for some of my toughest and most hard hitting songs. On the mid tempo groove, pulp culture, where I poked fun at the hedonistic Los Angeles lifestyle, and on the epic Budapest by Blimp, which was a British expatriate looking back at European imperial splendor through an American lens. See the priceless antiquity frozen in time, built on the ashes of the Jews, and for your curiosity, beauty sublime, signed in the blood of the Zulus, from Budapest by Blimp at Thomas Dolby, 1988. The Aliens Ate My Buick album was a critical success, earning me 4 Grammy nominations, but the radio play and sales were disappointing and never gathered momentum. The general feedback from the record label, now EMI Manhattan Records, was that I had gone too far overboard with my tongue-in-cheek funk grooves and risque lyrics, and alienated radio programmers and retailers. They were not pleased with this new direction and felt I'd been more on the right track with the previous album, the organic and introspective The Flat Earth. Now they tell me, I thought, where were they when I was in my quote organic phase? I feel like I feel like it doesn't have mass appeal, his music. It's sort of I'm sure it has appeal someone, to maybe many people, but not general public. Pop music, popular music. I don't think it is in that category altogether. Not the the grand lion's share of his music. I mean, some songs here and there, and some of the bands he's worked with have more mass appeal. But I feel like a song like this, Budapest by Blimp, it just isn't there. Um, I mean, I don't know, maybe some point in the future or the right soundtrack, but I feel like he thinks that it has more, like if it was promoted more or something. But um, it's not. It's not necessarily an insult to the music. It's just not something I see as the general public understanding how he wants them to. Anyway, the problem, they said, was that their promotion people didn't know whose jurisdiction I fell under. The rock division, which mostly promoted white musicians with guitars and drum kits, or the urban division, which handled black artists whose records featured danceable grooves and soulful vocals. For this and other reasons, they decided at 8 p.m. on the evening before I was due to depart on a 30-day tour promoting my the new album, to withdraw their tour support, leaving me with two choices: cancel the dates and disappoint my fans, or cover the $60,000 shortfall myself. I chose the latter, but it worried me that my own record company was unwilling to back my efforts to promote the album. The more I saw of EMI, the more I felt they were a dinosaur corporation from an extinct age. They needed to pigeonhole everything in order to understand it. Artists were supposed to follow tried and trusted formulas and conform their music to what the corrupt radio networks thought would sell. More advertising. I wouldn't play the game, so they pulled the rug out from under me. There are two kinds of musicians in the world. The first wants nothing more in life than to sign a contract with a major record label. The second wants nothing more in life than to tear the contract up. That is so, that's not true. Which one are you? You seem to have wanted to get married. You seem to have wanted to. Okay. By the end of the 1980s, I had a burning desire to extricate myself from EMI, no matter the price, even if it meant getting out of the music business altogether. But how did your tour go? You blame them. You put up the 60. How did it go? Maybe in the next chapter. Because nowadays, when was Katy Perry's last concert? Like, and she's still quite well known, didn't do that. Like a lot of tours this year. I think it's why people said like the Eras tour, not only was it wildly successful, but it stands out amongst a sea of at the same time and since very unsuccessful tours. Financially and otherwise, they weren't filling stadiums. So they had to like pull out and cancel shows because they weren't selling enough seats. I want to know how his did because they might. Prefab Sprout's manager called. He said Patty McAloon had demos for a new album. He was desperate to play me. This is not a good time, Keith, I snapped at him. I'm too wrapped up in my own career. Just give them a listen, Thomas, he urged me. I reluctantly agreed, knowing full well there would be new Sprout songs I would fall in love with and be powerless to turn down. It was always the same story. The tape showed up, and sure enough, I got as far as the second track, Wild Horses, and I was mesmerized. By the time Jesse James Bolero faded out, I was irretrievably hooked. I called Patty to tell him how much I loved the new songs. I flew to London and met up with Patty and Wendy in a cafe in Camden Town. You've got to produce this, Thomas, he said. It's a 19-song double album. It's called Jordan, The Comeback. It's about Elvis and death. As Kathleen is quick to point out, I spent 7 months out of our first year of marriage living with the Sprouts in leafy English country recording studios. Okay. Oh, chapter 8. Stars explode, fireworks don't. So speaking of, it sounded like there was some like gunshots outside today, and I'm not saying it was fireworks. I think it might have been some gunshots or something because it was just there. I mean, it was raining anyway. Um, and I was like, feel like get inside. It wasn't many, like a pop, pop. And like that was it. Like, oh no, what was that? Get inside. In January 1990, Michael Jackson concluded a year-long world tour with a series of 5 concerts in the Los Angeles Sports Arena. Now, at the peak of his fame, Michael had smashed all the record books. He had also become a global curiosity, yet his quirky habits and strange lifestyle choices, intriguing to some and revolting to others, did nothing to take away from his commercial appeal. With his Bad album topping the charts, the LA dates were sold out within hours of going on sale. On the last night of the tour, all of Hollywood turned out to see him. He had sent personal messages to every A-list celebrity, inviting them backstage for a reception before the show. His office sent Mary Collar 4 complimentary tickets, and she brought Kathleen and me along with my bass player and lodger, Terry Jackson. Under the bleachers in this huge concrete backstage area of the arena, the scene was chaotic. Michael's people had set up a large Bedouin tent surrounded by exotic Parisian rugs. Wolfgang Puck was doing the catering, but there were dozens more VIPs than he'd anticipated. By the time we arrived, glasses were dry and the hors d'oeuvres were long gone. No paparazzi were allowed backstage, but there was a professional camera set up inside the tent, as Michael's desire was to create the photo album to end all photo albums featuring himself posing with the top names in show business. With less than an hour until Michael was due on stage, time was running short. The staff began to herd the celebs toward the tent in a long, unruly line that was moving very slowly. I think that Michael Jackson biopic movie's coming out next year, no? 2026? I hope they play his music in it. This did not go over too well. Lou the Hulk Ferrigno stepped on Danny DeVito's toe. Paula Abdul was getting antsy, and Arnold Schwarzenegger started complaining loudly to one of Michael's staff, who was talking helplessly into his headset microphone. Michael's trusted family retainer, Bill, usually ran things in this situation, but he seemed to be absent. Ahead of us at the line, I heard Joan Rivers' whiny voice call out, "This sucks, Michael." I could see it. Without missing a beat, Mary Collar stepped up to the front of the line and started directing traffic. Most of Michael's staff knew her as his assistant. And must have assumed she was still on his payroll. Mary waved her arms and issued orders this way and that, reassuring the listless celebs that their turn with Michael would arrive very soon. You could see the flashes popping inside the tent. Once Mary took charge, the line began to thin out, and our foursome were the last to step inside to see Michael's inner sanctum. The tent interior was brightly lit and lavishly decorated, like a Rudolph Valentino movie set. Michael greeted me warmly, and I introduced Kathleen and Terry. He briefly clutched Mary's hand, then turned directly to the photographer and struck a rigid camera pose, smiling from ear to ear. The photographer motioned for the guests to huddle close to Michael and compose the shot. Much to my surprise, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Kathleen lean in to whisper something in his ear. As he took in Kathleen's words, his face slowly crumbled. By the time she had finished, he looked utterly miserable, and then he turned to her and said, "Well, maybe Bill could do that." And with that, his smile returned. The photographer snapped a couple of shots, and our audience with the King of Pop was over. Outside, I asked Kathleen what on earth she had said. I told him, "You should be ashamed of yourself. Mary was devoted to you. You really need to apologize to her because you broke her heart." I instantly wrapped my arms around my wife and told her I loved her. This was certainly the only real thing anyone had said to him all evening, but he never did apologize, and it's only because of Mary's complete loyalty to Michael and the Jackson legacy that she has never to this day spilled the beans about her 3 years working as his personal assistant. Oh, please. It was only that and not an NDA that she couldn't disclose that. Give me a break. Mm. Mary was a brilliant fixer. Still, I dropped her right in the deep end when we accepted an invitation to take part in a historic event in Moscow, USSR. It was a quarter past midnight at Moscow's OPJS Central Telegraph Office. The allocated time for my call to the USA from a dilapidated row of phone booths. All the phones at our hotel, the Mammoth Cosmos Hotel, a monument to the achievement of the socialist worker, were out of order. I had a hard time flagging down a taxi in the street, not knowing that the Moscow at that time there were two ways to do it. One, hold up a number of fingers indicating the multiple of the meter price you were willing to pay, or two, hold up a packet of Marlboro cigarettes, which was enough to get you a ride anywhere in the city. This was to be the first ever trans-global simulcast of a rock concert. Produced by Much Music, Canada's answer to MTV, the show was being filmed live in Toronto, New York, London, Paris, Moscow, and Sydney. Earlier in the evening, I'd shared the stage with Canadian rock superstar Bryan Adams, performing in front of a Russian audience who totally failed to see the significance of the event. The 10-minute satellite window during which Moscow broadcast to the world was part of their regular Saturday evening TV variety show, and the producers couldn't wait to hustle us off the stage so they could set up a gypsy juggling troupe, who were much more to the audience's taste. We'd gone right to the TV studio from a grueling 3-leg, 22-hour flight to Russia. And after the show, I was desperate to call Kathleen back in LA to let her know I was alive. With the Cosmos Hotel phones out of order, my only option was the grim Central Telegraph office. I made it down there at about 11 p.m., and though the booths appeared to be empty, the clerk told me the first slot she had available was at 12:15 a.m. I sat on the hard wooden bench, grinning at her and watching the clock above her head. "Oh, thank you, Jerry." Finally, at the appointed time, she pointed me in the direction of booth number 7. My call was put through to the USA. The operator connected me, and after a few rings, Kathleen answered the phone. She was relieved to hear my voice. Then she said, "Sweetie, I hope you're sitting down. I'm pregnant." "You're what?" I blurted out. Then suddenly the line went very quiet. I could just about hear her voice, but I could barely make out the words. It was fantastic news. "Yes, you heard me. I'm pregnant. When are you coming home?" "I'll change my flight and try to be there the day after tomorrow," I yelled. The next day, our guide and interpreter told me why the phone line had gone quiet. "It's the KGB," she said. "If they can't understand what you're saying, they turn down the volume. So you have to speak extra loud and slow." I managed to find a taxi back to the Cosmos Hotel, feeling on top of the world. It was nearly 1 a.m. and the place was hopping. A huge throng filled the massive atrium bar area, composed mainly of Russian prostitutes, whores, and foreign businessmen. I found Mary Collar in the middle of a group of Hungarian salesmen and their dates playing drinking games. Their umpire and ringleader was Brian Adams, and it appeared he had decided Mary was the main prize. I, I'm so glad this guy decided to give up um, the LA record business industry due to the corruption and go to Russia, where God knows it's not filled with corruption there. Tray upon tray of vodka shots were lined up on the bar, charged to Brian's tab. He urged me to join in. Any other night I'd have declined, but I just found out I was going to be a father, and tonight I was celebrating too. I watched the other players to get the hang of it. Before each vodka shot, you had to smack yourself on the cheek with the back of your hand. The harder the slap, the louder the cheer from your fellow drinkers. As time went on, the preamble got more elaborate. You roll down your shirt and collar and undoing your tie if need be, then smack and down in one. The ladies were not to be left out. For one Russian prostitute, this meant removing her gaudy earrings and undoing her top buttons, revealing a lacy bra strap. The poor girl must have had a dozen shots, and her makeup was starting to run from the tears of laughter rolling down her rosy cheeks. Like Santa. Although, didn't they say Santa drinks as well? I forget. Two on-duty Soviet soldiers with semi-automatic weapons eyed the proceedings disapprovingly from across the hall. When they felt matters had gone far enough, they decided to break up the game. They pushed their way into the scrum and tried to eject the prostitutes. Their progress was impeded by several drunken Hungarians who clapped them on the back and urged them to lighten up, thrusting vodka shots under their noses. Mary was loving all of this, and Brian Adams was on the top of his game, conducting a sing-along in pig Russian from atop the bar. A cross-eyed businessman started fingering one soldier's Kalashnikov. That was when I decided it was time to call it a night. I dragged Mary to the elevator and sent her to her room. The next day, heavily hungover, Mary and the interpreter arranged for us to take an early flight out of the USSR. And 24 hours later, after a brief stopover in Ireland, we finally made it home, exhausted, to LA. Kathleen and I were delighted with our news. We cleared our calendars for a few months. Our home needed a rethink to make it a suitable place to bring up a baby. We soundproofed the bedrooms to block out the ever-present drone of the 101 freeway, and I set about converting an extension to the basement to make room for a small studio for me and an office for Mary. I was determined to use this time to see if I could get myself out of my record contract. Andy Ferguson, ever the pragmatist, advised me to try to stick it out, but my mind was made up. On the surface, my contract was watertight, and even if I stopped recording, I would continue to be tied to the contract in perpetuity. But by asking around, I found out that several of the other artists on my label were as unhappy as I was. One of them, the platinum selling pop balladeer Richard Marx, was in a dispute over his royalties. Richard told me EMI had tried to withhold hundreds of thousands of dollars owed to him in order to boost their quarterly earnings and make the parent company, Thorn EMI, look good to its shareholders. Richard's aggressive manager, Alan Kovac, was having none of it. He threatened to sue EMI unless they released Richard and two other artists he represented. I briefly had the idea of hiring Alan myself to add some leverage and get me out of my contract. Fortunately, EMI made that unnecessary because halfway through the recording of my fourth album, Astronauts and Heretics, they declined to pick up their option to release it. This was all very well, sure, but the timing was far from ideal. I had already been in the studio for several months, and now those bills would come directly to me. I put this out of my mind and tried to block out any business concerns while I got the record finished. I left Annie and my lawyers to sort out the formalities. After 8 years and three albums, I was no longer an EMI artist. Although, of course, the company would continue to own my recordings and videos, and still do, they left me high and dry and desperately short of funds. But it felt great to be a free agent. Great and a little scary. Hindsight is 2020, but in 1989, none of us could see the big picture. All I knew was that EMI and most of the major labels were so bogged down with their conventional way of doing things, they would resist change in any form. And I was finally rid of EMI, but I still needed to get my half finished album released. There were other labels to approach, including several up and coming indies. I wondered if it was going to be a case of out of the frying pan into the fire. The one company that seemed to be forward thinking was Virgin. They were expanding their brand into many different areas, from film and TV to airlines, insurance, even health and fitness. They had the reputation for sticking to their belief in their artists, allowing them the freedom to experiment and grow. And Andy had a great relationship with Virgin Records bosses, Paul Conroy and Simon Draper. So when my EMI termination letter finally arrived, I headed straight back to London and showed up, metaphorically speaking, on Richard Branson's doorstep, hoping he'd be as good as his word at that cricket match many years before. I doubt Branson knew much about it or even remembered I existed, but in November 1989, Virgin Records offered me a lucrative new record contract. It included a huge advance I was for the UK only, leaving us free to negotiate a separate deal for the USA. This was a major coup on Andy's part, considering how poorly my previous two albums had performed. With a new label eager to hear it, I hurried to complete the recording of Astronauts and Heretics. In the press, I thumbed my nose at my former label and I called several of the top guys at EMI to tell them exactly what I thought of them. Why am I not surprised? Mm, okay. Santa drinks different things. Well, I could have sworn I've read some old timey Christmas um like really old fashioned, that he did drink something for warmth or something. And I mean, I'm sure his nose red and all that too from the cold. I feel like I can recall it from somewhere hearing that. Right. Anyway, he's lighting all his bridges on fire. That's very nice. 6 months later, Richard Branson sold Virgin Records to EMI. There was a great 60s cult TV show called The Prisoner. Each episode had Patrick McGowan as number 6, trying to outwit an invisible, repressive governing force. In order to escape the surreal island where he was held captive, the final shot of every episode was a close up of McGowan's face as a heavy cast iron grate clanged down in front of him. I've never heard of this show. Oh, thank you, Rob. Mangoes. Thank you. Mm. When I heard the Virgin news, I felt just like number 6. So, when I got a call from Roger Waters offering me a part of a giant production of The Wall in Berlin, it seemed just the ticket. It's a miserable piece, and it matched my mood entirely. Pink Floyd had last performed The Wall in concert in 1981. Waters said the only way he would ever revive it was amid the ruins of the Berlin Wall. In November 1989, the wall came triumphantly crashing down, and Waters agreed to perform his piece again. A spectacular live production was planned to be broadcast live to 35 countries via satellite and staged in front of 350,000 people at what had formerly been no man's land near the Brandenburg Gate. A 591 by 82-foot fully collapsible wall was constructed, stretching from west to east Berlin. The land had hardly been used since the end of World War II, and in preparation for the show, West German military personnel were brought in to scan for unexploded ordnances. During this process, they uncovered a maze of tunnels that had made up part of Hitler's bunker, complete with faded Nazi banners still hanging on the walls. It was the largest one-day rock concert ever staged and the most multi-layered. What with the live TV production crew, video and laser projectionists, pyrotechnics, giant puppets, and a cast of thousands all tripping over each other in a construction site. Rehearsals were a catastrophe. High winds were playing havoc with the puppets. Polystyrene bricks were flying out of the wall. Camera crews were stepping on pyrotechnic devices. The 150 Red Army chorus singers had nowhere to pee. Roger Waters, who had a hand in every last detail of the show, was walking around with a black cloud over his head. Among the all-star cast were Marianne Faithfull, Jerry Hall, Sinead O'Connor, Brian Adams, Albert Finney, and Tim Curry, along with several of my all-time heroes, such as Van Morrison, Joni Mitchell, Garth Hudson, My role as the ghoulish Scottish school teacher. I came on stage during another brick in the wall to play a solo on a guitar, jousting with Cindy Lauper, the vocalist, who was dressed up as a schoolgirl in the final trial scene. I was to be suspended from the top of the 80-foot wall like Gerald Scarf's grotesque puppet, screaming at the top of my voice in Glaswegian. My head was shaved aside from three nasty little tufts. I wore a special suit with 15-foot long arms and legs, and under it a mountaineering harness. As my cue approached, I was shown down into a deep well behind the stage, but in front of the wall. Wires were attached to the shoulders of my harness, which led up over pulleys at the top of the wall and down to a sandbag that was roughly my weight. As I lay there in the darkness, 2 dozen U.S. 7th Airborne commandos in jack boots upsealed down the wall and landed all around me. Then, as my musical intro started, stagehands yanked on the sandbag, and I was catapulted halfway up the wall and into the beam of a powerful searchlight. I thrashed around on my wire, doing my best puppet imitation, and glared out across the Potsdamer Platz at the delirious crowd of nearly 500,000 people. Kathleen was with me in Berlin and suffering from extreme morning sickness. She spent most of the trip on the couch in our hotel suite with the blinds down. Blinds drawn, when the room service wheeled in a trolley to set up our dinner, she withdrew to the bedroom and told me to bring her only a small side plate of food at a time. She'd never drunk alcohol in her life, but now she suddenly announced that she needed to sniff my red wine before she could stomach a mouthful of food. On top of everything, her breasts were huge. They're on the large side anyway, but even at this early stage of pregnancy, they're bursting out of her top. She urgently needed me to go out and buy her a bigger brassiere. I speak a few words of German, but this called for a vocabulary that was way beyond me. I bought an English German phrase book and hailed a cab to take me to the nearest department store. In the taxi, I found the phrase I needed. Mein Frau ist Schwager, sie braucht einen neuen Bustenhalter. A Bustenhalter? Are you serious? I checked inside the front cover to make sure the publisher was not Monty Python Inc. Imminent parenthood does strange things to your mind. You take a long, hard look at the world you're about to bring a child into. I returned from Berlin determined not to let record industry politics stop me from making a great album. I wanted to get as much music as I could in the can before the baby's arrival. As Kathleen's belly swelled, I spent long hours in the studio, writing and recording a set of songs that were more introspective and more metaphysical than any I'd attempted. The new direction called out for curious collection of maverick musicians. It also took me on some wild road trips. While I was in Europe, my great friend Grant Morris made a snap decision to move to New Orleans. He loved the music and the food there and found it conducive to his screenwriting. After offloading his crumbling one-story bungalow in the Hollywood Hills, he was able to buy a precious gem of a house in the Garden District with change to spare. I'd never been to Louisiana, but when I realized Grant was seriously quitting LA for good, I decided to go and see him in his new locale. The 4-day trip was a musical whirlwind. He took me to a venue called the Maple Leaf deep in the housing projects, where my jaw dropped on hearing the dizzying funk of rebirth for the first time. there were at least 9 brass players crammed into the small stage, ranging in age from 14 to 85, and a single marching drum. How could their sound be so tight and so loose at the same time? It unraveled in my mind a musicological thread dating from Louis Armstrong all the way through to James Brown, George Clinton, and Prince. I'm trying to find the right words to say what conceptually I want to say, but just because I've conceived of the thought, the wording has to be at least somewhat right. Um, British artists, I'll call it I'll call it an affinity. They have an affinity for Black American musicians. Um, from yeah, all the way from like the Rolling Stones. This guy, it's like across the board. Um, there, I mean, you can call it a respect there. I'd say there's a respect there. The Beatles, whatever. But I mean, there's also, I mean, oh, what's the word? uh, what's a nice way of saying stealing? Because I'd rather go with that, but from people that are you know how he says is oh, one of my favorites, Marvin Gaye. I cried. It's yeah. Uh, okay. It's. I mean, there's a layers to it because of the history of Black people in this country. That copying from them. I mean, there's layers to it. Okay. Yeah. Because you have privilege that they don't, and they didn't, and it's it's difficult because of course artistically you're inspired, but you also, I mean, Michael Jackson had to work a hell of a lot harder than you did, and there's show some fucking respect. I don't know. Hmm. James Brown, George Clinton, and Prince pouring out of there at 9 in the morning. We went to the Zydeco bowling alley where the bourbon tasted pretty good in plastic cups. Later, we hung out with the rickety Ernie K. Doe at his own moth-eaten lounge bar and watched him mime to his 1960s hit mother-in-law in a sweet sequin suit, like a scene right out of Blue Velvet. I had tapes with me of some of the grooves from my album. Grant rustled up a car and we trekked out to the bayou in search of a couple of local Cajun musicians he knew. Wayne Toops and Michael Doucette. We met them in a ramshackle recording studio in the back of a record shop. I set up some mics and began to run the grooves. Within minutes, the word got out around town that there was a session on. Every time I turned around, somebody's second cousin had shown up unannounced with a different instrument, and soon it was a nonstop party. The whole experience was eventually distilled into a couple of fine songs: Silk Pajamas and the epic I Love You Goodbye. It was the last mad road trip with my friend before the responsibilities of fatherhood took over. Hmm. Our daughter, Lillian Harper Robertson, was born February 3rd, 1991. She was a delightful, bouncy baby girl and a very light sleeper. Our sleep patterns were severely disrupted, and my album ground to a temporary halt. But we were very, very happy. On a rare occasion that I was able to sneak downstairs and do some writing, I played the piano until the sun came up and wrote a love song for Kathleen. Around 7 a.m., she wandered sleepily into the living room in her pajamas and told me the baby was fast asleep. I sat her down next to me on the piano stool. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I sang the ballad I'd written for her, The Beauty of a Dream. The song had a coda that was crying out for some great guitar playing. I had a crazy idea that perhaps Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead would do it. I've been a bit of a deadhead in my early teens, having seen a couple of their rare British appearances at Nebworth and Alexandra Palace. In front of their famous wall of loudspeakers, I'd always liked the way the two of them interacted, Weir's choppy rhythm chords intuitively voicing Garcia's melodic phrases, but I had no idea if my album's recording budget would stretch that far. To my delight, not only did they return my phone call, but they said if I was willing to visit them in Northern California, they would have a crack at my song. They refused to be paid a penny for their work. I was unsure what to expect. Garcia had been in and out of rehab, and I heard his health was fading. I flew up to San Francisco with my multi-track tapes under my arm and drove a rental car over to the Golden Gate Bridge to Marion County, which I still knew my way around. The Dead had a combined storage warehouse and rehearsal space in a shabby industrial estate on the outskirts of San Rafael. So I saw something the other day. Someone said how like Kiss, the band Kiss, their image and everything is like you think that it's like really dark. Like they were like there was like commentary from like a Kiss music video and how like it helped revive their image and everything. But it's also was like it wasn't like allowed in their house, so they thought this was like going to be really dark and demonic. And it's like actually just like like sort of generic, sweet, like playful 70s pop music, sort of like. I mean, um. Anyway, so they said that someone else said that the Grateful Dead that they always thought like by the image of the name, the skulls and stuff like this is like what's that like hardcore like what was that? What am I thinking of like not just like heavy metal but like death metal or like the really like that's what I thought though too like when I listened to it because John likes it. And I even have a song with my name in it. And it's not like that at all. It's very dark. Like yeah. This was like just yesterday. I think I saw that song. Anyway, they had a combined storage warehouse and rehearsal space in a shabby industrial estate on the outskirts of San Rafael. It was packed to the rafters with their mountainous PA rig. In the midst of it, a rehearsal space had been cleared, and they were busy preparing for a new tour with Bruce Hornsby on piano. There was a giant mixing desk and a pair of Studer 24 tracks to record their rehearsal. I suppose I naively expected the Dead to turn up on Harleys and Hell's Angels denim and leather, or in a psychedelic painted Volkswagen bus. So I was quite surprised when a brand new BMW 7 Series sedan pulled up in front of the warehouse. and out stepped Jerry Garcia in an impeccable Giorgio Armani suit. While the engineer set up the tapes, we pulled up a pair of stools and chatted. I was surprised to hear Jerry say that he owned a copy of my first album and really liked one of our submarines. He'd heard some of my newer stuff on KFOG. These days, Jerry said the Grateful Dead didn't sell many records. Maybe not, I pointed out, but aren't you still the biggest grossing rock and roll band in the world? Garcia shrugged and flashed me a big grin. I can't really explain it, man, he said. These dirty hippie chicks just keep following us around. What? Bobby Weir showed up and was very keen to get on with the track. We sat in a circle and began to run through the last 24 bars of my song. I kind of love to talk about people that are dead and like can't say anything for themselves. You're full of shit. Mm. Weir was very on the ball and quickly worked out the chords, easily finding his way to the correct inversions. Mm. Jerry, on the other hand, was lost. He seemed to be having a hard time getting to grips with the changes or finding gaps between the vocal lines. He didn't sound like himself at all. At one point, I realized he was actually trying to make the synth melody from one of our submarines fit into this very different song. We're trying to follow him, but it just wasn't working. In my imagination, they would sound just like the Dead always did, but overlaid on top of my music. In Jerry's mind, I was asking him to make his guitar sound like my synths. Between takes, as the tape was rewinded, Jerry doodled absentmindedly on the lovely custom guitar he called Rosebud. I learned years earlier from the masterful Mutt Lang that for the duration of a tracking session, you should always run a two-track recorder alongside the multi-track just to capture the little asides that happen even when the 24 track isn't rolling. So I brought my portable DAT recorder with me, and as Jerry doodled, I glanced over to make sure the meters on the DAT were lining up. His licks were a little incoherent, but it sounded like Jerry, or at least sounded as if someone had dug up Jerry's cadaver and attached electrodes to his tendons. And the muscle memory had triggered a few random riffs in B major left over from the Summer of Love. The session was over in about 3 hours. I tipped the engineers and expressed my gratitude to Bob and Jerry. Bob took me aside and apologized profusely. He felt terrible that I had come all this way and he and his bandmate hadn't delivered. Far from it, I told him. I've got plenty I can use. Back in my basement studio in LA, I set to work on the tracks. Although multi-track analog tape was still the norm in 1991, computers were just starting to come into the frame. I had new software on my Mac Plus called Opcode Studio Vision, and it could do a limited amount of 16-bit digital recording. The consensus among sound engineers was that computers were not yet a replacement for analog tape, but to me, the most exciting aspect was the ability to chop up recordings into small chunks and use them as building blocks. Cutting and pasting phrases and bars of music the way an author would manipulate prose in a word processor. I transferred Jerry's off-the-cuff improvisations from my DAT tapes into the Mac and began to piece together a solo that I hoped would be worthy of his name. A week later, I sent the results up to San Rafael, and Bob Weir called me plainly relieved. He said I'd done wonders considering what Jerry had played and asked if I would return the favor one day and do some work on one of their albums. I said I'd be honored to. Sadly, it was never to be as Jerry died only a few years later. Whereas the lyrics I wrote in my early 20s tended to be at an arm's length about submarines, dissidents, and wind turbines, the songs on my new album were increasingly personal, growing out of the episodes and relationships that mattered in my life. On one song, I did a duet with the wonderful Scottish female vocalist Eddie Reader. Being a songwriter occasionally gives you back the opportunity to say things you wish you'd said in person and to put words into other people's mouths. In this case, Leslie's. And I know that it was just the fear of flying, and I know it's hard to keep myself from crying, but when my tears are washed away, you'll still be blind, skin diving for jewels. You were a shining pearl under moonlight, and I was cruel. From Cruel, Thomas Dolby, 1992. Mm, well, they're constantly recording. Juicy. I mean, probably, but I don't know. So John told me his favorite movie was that Howard the Duck. No, he didn't say that, but he sent me I think it's like a scene from it that and I'm watching it, and then there's like naked duck ladies, like they had play duck with like duck breasts and like duck nipples. Sorry. I mean, he didn't say that he enjoyed that erotically. Okay, but I thought it was like, what? But I told him I was going to tell everyone that was his favorite movie. The album was full of joy as well. I was amazed by the way Kathleen's body and mind were transforming before my eyes as she grew into her role as a mother, and of course, I was in love with our delightful daughter. My album was taking shape, but a couple of songs still needed a few guitar touches. Kathleen used to hang out with the actress Valerie Bertinelli, who was married to Eddie Van Halen. Eddie and I had met before at award shows. He was possibly the best rock and roll guitarist on the planet, and I wondered if I could nab him to play a few notes on my album. Like me, he was an odd mixture of very shy and very arrogant. Kathleen called Val and she connected us. Eddie was interested, but he and his band were midway through their own album for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. And he warned me that his bandmates, especially his older brother Alex, were not keen on him guesting for other people, but he said he could do a few hours recording over a weekend at his home studio in the hills above Coldwater Canyon. I followed a winding drive to Eddie's 56-room Tudor mansion with my multi-track tapes. The studio was a little farther up the hill. Eddie's engineer was the legendary Andy Johns, a towering cockney, and he was apparently on a weekend bender of booze and drugs. Eddie himself was stone cold sober. We sat in the control room, surrounded by a dozen electric guitars on stands, including his famous red and white striped Frankenstrat, and chatted nervously. Usually, when you meet a fellow musician from any corner of the world, you can break the ice by quoting a random line from This is Spinal Tap. It is the universal currency. So, when Eddie wanted to illustrate an idea for my song and reach for his as yet unplugged Frankenstrat, I said, shh, listen to that sustain. You could go out for a bite to eat while that's going on. I waited, but Eddie looked at me completely blankly. Um, did you ever see that movie? I asked. This is Spinal Tap, the mock rockumentary. Yeah, dude, said Eddie. We saw that piece of shit. You weren't so into it. We didn't think it was funny. It was like someone followed us around with a camera, put it up on a screen, and everybody fell over laughing. Over the course of that weekend, I understood. Eddie's playing on my songs was out of this world, but every hour of his day was a scene from Spinal Tap. The studio was like a padded den for adolescent schoolboys. In the back room, there was an automated hot dog vending machine, an electronic dartboard, and a row of four Grand Prix racer arcade game machines, so the band could have races. A little way into our session, it became apparent that Andy Johns was the worse for wear. Eddie could operate the 24 track himself, so he told Johns to go home. All right, you little Dutch git, said Johns affectionately. I'll see you Monday. Come here, give me a hug. He smothered Eddie in a bear hug and exited the studio. Moments later, we heard a deafening crash. Eddie ran outside and I followed behind. Johns had reversed his large mauve Cadillac convertible into a stone statue. Wanker, shouted Eddie. He turned to me. He's knocked an arm off one of the statues. Val's gonna kill me. It was a warm Saturday evening, and we'd been working with the studio door open. Eddie laying down a righteous, chunky rhythm guitar on one song and an array of dizzying solo licks on another. When it was time for a break, he suggested we head down the hill to the main house. Shall we walk or drive? Eddie said. We might as well walk, no? I said. He grinned shyly. I never walk, he said, and disappeared around the back. Seconds later, he emerged at the wheel of an electric golf cart, its roof painted in his personalized red and white striped Frankenstrat color scheme. We poodled 100 yards around the hillside, eventually arriving at the front door of the mansion, not 50 feet below the studio. As we stepped out, I suddenly heard the honking of horns and shrill, distant cries of Eddie, Eddie, yeah. High above his property, a group of fans had parked their trucks and hot rods on a scenic overlook off of Mulholland, and they were screaming and flashing their headlights, amazed to get an actual sighting of their favorite guitar god. Oh, thank you, Jerry. No. Mm. Down at the Tudor mansion, Eddie sank into an oversized armchair and grabbed a remote to flick on the massive gas fireplace with a loud whoomp. Eddie, complained Val, it's 90 degrees out. Crank up the AC then, would you, babe? I'm beat. He told me to help myself to a soda from the fridge. In the kitchen, I ran into his brother Alex. He looked at me suspiciously. I hear you're not nuts about Eddie playing on my album, I inquired. You got that right, bro, Alex said. Last time we let him do that, he did a solo on that little fucker Michael Jackson's record. That was the only reason 1984 got stuck at number 2. On the Sunday evening, after a marathon recording session lasting most of the weekend, Eddie and I completed his overdubs on 2 of my songs, Easter Block and Close but No Cigar. I felt that familiar mixture of satisfaction and fatigue. When you know you've got something great down on tape, but you're too tired to edit it. At home, Kathleen and baby Lily, now 6 weeks old, were waiting for me. We were sitting on a couch in the smallest room in the house when we got the news that Terry Jackson had been in an accident. He was on a small charter jet with other members of country singer Reba McEntire's band and crew. They took off in a bad visibility from Brown Field near San Diego, and 6 minutes later it flew into the side of a mountain. There were no survivors. Terry was dead. I stumbled out of the house in a daze, unable to process the news. I reached the top of the trail up above the Griffith Observatory and sat down on a rock still warm from the afternoon sun. Over the distant Pacific Ocean, the sky was starting to turn pink. Way below, I could make out the taillights of the commuter traffic on Sunset Boulevard. A melody took root in my head and kept repeating over and over. I live in a suitcase. I live in a suitcase. I stared out over the darkening city as the mathematical grid of lights began to throb and glow. Somewhere away in the undergrowth, a pack of howling coyotes had ambushed their prey, probably a domestic pet. Above downtown, a police helicopter was rotating around the beam of its own searchlight. Los Angeles was a glittering lake of lights. Beyond the city, I could now see the silhouette of the high mountains to the south, and above them, the deep blue of the night sky, with a faint flicker of the early stars and planets. Then my trance was suddenly broken. Half the city of Los Angeles flickered and went black, leaving a river of red and white light flowing along the network of freeways. This must have been a massive power outage, a brownout of some sort. It was as if one side of LA's bloated torso wore a resplendent cloak. The other, its skin peeled away, was exposing its arterial veins. My breathing slowed and the lines came to me. When all the lights go down, this dirty desert town is theater in the round with stars instead of a crowd. From I Live in a Suitcase, Thomas Dolby, 1991. It was the spring of 1991. The fallout from the Gulf War and the generally weak economy was hitting Los Angeles hard. Movie theaters weren't filling, concert receipts were going down, and even Billboard's top selling albums were barely going platinum. LA's restaurants and bars were deserted. In the wake of the Rodney King case, in which 4 police officers were acquitted after being caught on camera beating up a black civilian, there were widespread riots with looting and arson in the streets. The view from the picture window of our living room a few blocks down the hill to where Hollywood Boulevard shops were on fire looked like a disaster movie, not least because our view was dominated by the Capitol Records Tower, always the first building to get blown away in disaster movies. The fires were put out, but Capitol Records and their major label cousins had other problems to contend with. The world they ruled over was one of brick and mortar. Their total control of consumer music sales was built on a network of pressing plants, fleets of vans, and historical relationships with retail chains and media channels. They had beefed up their revenues by reselling fans' music they already owned in the novel CD format. That was a limited market, and it took the focus away from developing new artists. Meanwhile, the mega stadium acts of the 1980s, Bruce Springsteen, Bon Jovi, George Michael, Prince, Madonna, even Michael Jackson, began to lose their selling power. With that as a backdrop, I found it very hard to find a label that would release my 4th album, Astronauts and Heretics, in the USA. I was immensely proud of it, but I had to admit it was a moody and introspective piece without any of the synth pop quirkiness that had been a benchmark of hits like Science and Hyperactive. Oh my God, mm, this album was never going to be a hit. Jesus. It's like they won't just take it. The only offer came from the recently launched Giant Records, run by a music industry giant by the name of Irving Azoff. All 5 feet and 3 inches of him, Irving was known in the business as the Poison Dwarf. His commercial track record was astonishing, as were the rudeness and disdain with which he treated me. Along with most of his staff, Astronauts and Heretics came out in the USA on Giant in 1992, sank without a trace, and left a deep gash in my heart, still barely healing from the death of my dear friend. It was time to move on. It sounds like it was time before you released your piece of shit album. Sorry. He puts himself in like the same category as Prince, Madonna, Michael Jackson, like, oh, here we go. Part two, chapter 9, Ride the Bullet Train. My son once slid down our attic steps with an armful of old vinyl jazz albums, shouting, "Daddy, look what I found! Giant CDs." If you were born later than 1985, you'll scarcely remember the days before music went digital. Perhaps as a child, you heard your mom and dad fondly reminiscing about turntables and turners and transitions. You may remember those dusty crates of 8-track tapes on the top shelf in the garage with their pictorial labels featuring Cat Stevens and the Bee Gees and Fleetwood Mac. Um, I remember half my mom's face bruised up on Christmas morning. Extreme poverty. I've never met my father, and my mom's dead. Th What makes you think my life and yours have anything in common? The only curiosity left after you made sure to have your daughter on American soil is if you had your son here, because I'm betting that that's the only reason you're really here. But thanks for shitting on my country. Today, even compact discs seem like ancient archaeology. When my daughter was a teenager and already an avid iTunes user, her grandparents gave her a CD for Christmas, Fallen, by her favorite band, Evanescence. She took it to a party at a friend's house and left it by the stereo. Later that evening, she discovered that both the CD and its jewel case were gone. The poor girl came home distraught and bewildered. She just could not process the idea. One moment you own music, the next moment you don't. She couldn't just restore it from a backup or reauthorize her music collection. The current generation of music fans has seen technology evolve so rapidly that they no longer think of it in terms of a particular format or device. They still have their favorite artists and songs, but the music is decoupled from the delivery method. They know they can access a single or an album via whatever means are handy at the time: a mobile phone, an iPod, a computer in a public library, a friend's Spotify account, a rental car stereo, a hotel room TV, and so on. It no longer matters where the bits or atoms reside. The fan just logs in somewhere and knows he can hear the latest release by Coldplay because he's a Coldplay follower. To the fan, the concept of following is much fairer and more intuitive than the old model, where you had to go to a store and buy a physical product. Aside from the inconvenience of the store visit, if your record got scratched or lost or stolen or snatched by an ex-girlfriend, you'd be back to square one. It's also better for Coldplay because millions of fans who register to follow them are glad to submit their names and details, giving the band permission to gently push future releases, concert tickets, and merchandise their way as well. But Coldplay did well before and after digitized music. You've done neither, though. I can state this with confidence as I sit here writing in the second decade of the 21st century. Music went digital, the major record labels foundered. The new bosses are companies like Apple and Google and Spotify. That's all water under the bridge. But let me transport you back to the uncertainty of 1992, the year I abandoned the music business. Or did it abandon me?
You crashed out and failed. It sounded like.
And pursued a career in technology. A small but growing number of computer users were starting to connect to the internet via subscription services like CompuServe and America Online. Using these services, you could access and download digital files such as photos, applications, and songs. The user interfaces were unappealing and connection speeds were very slow. But there were new compression formats starting to appear, including Fraunhofer's MP3 format, which improved song downloads and storage by a factor of at least 10 to 1, with a quality loss that was barely discernible to the average listener.
I've been sending and receiving internet song files since the days of my Radio Shack TRS-80, fumbling around with acoustic cups in Nevada desert phone booths in the 1980s. That method of sending music from A to B was limited to the professional recording world, but when I first saw CompuServe with its folders of downloadable song files, my worldview was radically altered. It was a beautiful thing. My fans and I were now connected to the same network and using the same equipment. All I had to do was hit upload, and I could potentially distribute a song to millions of users worldwide at a negligible cost. Nirvana. Ugh. I began to speak in press interviews about the internet and its exciting possibilities. You didn't have to be a visionary to see this potential or understand its implications. Many of my peers recognized the possibilities around this time. I would find myself sitting on panels at tech conferences alongside people like Peter Gabriel, Laurie Anderson, and Todd Rundgren, the same fearless and forward looking artists who were the first to embrace music videos, the first to experiment with games and interactive CD-ROMs. We shared an enthusiasm for these technologies and couldn't wait to get our hands on the new tools that would allow us to explore their creative possibilities. Okay, we'll end it there for the night. This is beginning part two, so I feel it's about halfway through. This should be interesting. I was like, are you gonna? I was thinking, you hate everyone that's more talented than you. Are you going to say anything about Van Halen being quite a gifted guitar player there and very skilled, very like the only time you mentioned that was to say, oh yeah, like as like his loser fan screaming some guitar god. It's like, wow, you hate anyone that's more talented than you. Jesus. Uh, Beginning of Napster. Yeah, I'm sure he's gonna mention that. Uh, we'll see where this is going. I'll see if I can find that Grateful Dead song you did though, if it's out there. Oh my bags. I'm sorry that looks so shit. I shouldn't promise to look any better tomorrow because I intended to today. So anyway, I love you. I know it's Christmas where you are, Terry. He was showing me the Santa tracker last night. So um and it's almost Christmas on the East Coast. Um I do hope yours is better than mine, but I always do. Um, my plans for tonight is to try to get through tonight, but it's been what I do every night for a while now, so I see you tomorrow. I love you so much. Um, what do you say on Christmas Eve, right? I hope you don't get coal unless it's really cold and you need the coal or whatever. I hope you're not on the naughty list, but I kind of do hope you're naughty. Uh,
Sorry, I was gonna say something about, appreciate, the people you have and stuff, but I always have and it didn't make any difference, so, um, I'm not gonna assume that you don't. And then to really appreciate, you sort of then you're really in fear, aren't you? Like, I don't wanna lose you, so I guess, well, it never hurts to tell people that you love them, so always a good reminder there, and with that, I love you very much. Thank you for caring about me, it's the only thing that keeps me going.